Why? Yeah. Heart.
So really the heart.
That's not. It's going already.
No, go ahead.
It's exactly after.
What number is that up there? 0 still. Okay. You can share it.
Yeah, that's why I pull out the phone.
Yeah.
We should also put it in a group to start sharing.
Be as loud and as clear as possible. The discussion, no shy, and everyone is going to participate. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we is in it, so I kind of have to just sit and see what I'm saying.
Let me know when you're ready.
I'm just trying to get the.
We just monitor. Francisco, since you've processed any kind of comments and stuff, you could just monitor and let us know. Right. All right. So, good evening to everyone. This is a series of discussions that we're going to be having over the next couple of weeks as we head into the August 10th election. Now, we are naming this Community Chat, and we are starting off the first of this series at the Hart residence in Gulfview. So if you're on Gulfview Drive, if you're coming in on the right-hand side, and they have been so gracious to allow us into their space because they truly believe in what we're presenting in terms of our candidacy, our party, what we stand for. So we're really taking advantage of the opportunity to spread a message. And right before we started this, we were on the main road there, passing out the manifestos to residents of Gulfview as they were coming in or leaving out. And this is all part of the elections process. So what we're just going to be talking about this evening is a bunch of different topics ranging from the road to elections, what that experience has been for us thus far, what are the prospects for our candidacy. And you will notice that I will say our candidacy as much as I am the sole candidate running. This really is a group effort. This is all of our election, our candidacy moving into the August 10th election. And I would say that the support has been overwhelming. I honestly did not expect the kind of support that we have been receiving thus far, and it really gives hope and encouragement for things to come. Yeah. So I just want to introduce some of the other persons here on the table. As you would know, I am Nikoli Edwards, the candidate for San Fernando West and the political leader of the Progressive Party. So I would have everyone introduce themselves. I'll start off on my extreme left.
I'm Nikoli Wiley. I'm the head of the membership committee, chairman.
Hi, I'm Kieran Grant. I'm the vice chairman of the membership committee of the Progressive Party.
All right, hi everyone. I'm Mark Chandler. I'm the chairperson for the elections committee.
And good night, everyone. Francisco Sindano, simply a party supporter.
Nice. So we have persons who would have started off with this journey very early on, very much interested in what the Progressive Party has to offer, and taking it a step further, as opposed to simply, okay, let me stand on the wayside and be a bystander and just support from there, but actually getting involved. And none of these individuals were ever as deeply involved in a political party before this process. So that just speaks volumes in terms of, here you have some young individuals who are looking at Trinidad and Tobago, and they want to get involved in the political process to potentially see progress in the country. So I want to start off more or less with a discussion on at what point in looking at the Progressive Party did you decide to jump on board? Anyone can take that question.
All right, I'll jump in first. So, funny enough, from the onset, I had no interest in a political party. I practically gave up on politics because I thought that there was no real society didn't really want change and they didn't really want better for themselves, so to speak. And then the politicians tend to take advantage of that. But after sitting in on meetings, hearing the discussions, and not just hearing the discussions from Nikoli, but from the members that would contribute to it, I started to realize that it is more about the people in the party than the party itself. And I share Nikoli's opinion on the fact that, you know, the present political entities, I don't see myself reflected there. And so I thought to myself, why not make my image in a political party rather than hoping that one day it becomes the way I expect it to be. So as much as I don't like being on the front line of anything, I realized that at some point we had to step to the plate and we had to really put out there what we want in society rather than just hoping others would do it for us. So for me, I was one of the few people that was on from the onset, so to speak. And it's really because I felt motivated to put my energy and my effort into the growth and the development of this party.
So, yeah. Anyone else? Jump in.
I have something specific I want to talk about.
Well, for me, it is basically I reached a point in my life. I reached a point in my life where, especially we are in the year 2020, and this is the year of the youth. You know, in this century, in this not century, sorry. Well,
In this year.
yeah, in this year, it's the time for the youth, and but with the two major parties, red and yellow, their leaders are what we'll call, you know, more of the seniors, you know, the senior people. And I believe, yes, they may have some young people in their parties, but they will still have control. And the young person won't be able to express themselves as they would like to. So as Nikoli being a young man and showing that interest and that leadership qualities, and I was very impressed by that. So that's one of the main reasons that made me jump on board with the Progressive Party.
Francisco?
No.
No. But this just really speaks to the fact that we live in a country where everyone has choice, everyone has the ability to make decisions on their own, and you have a right to join a political party of your choosing, to support whomever you're interested in an election. And that's one of the beauties of a democracy. Now, of course, there are some downsides in a democracy where a lot of the times, because everyone has an opinion and we don't do enough in terms of negotiating positions and trying to find common ground, that if we had to go the route of consensus, many things will be left in abeyance because people simply are for themselves, and it has to be in this adversarial way. And what I've found is that when it comes to both PNM and UNC, it's a situation where you're either or. There is no middle ground, apparently. But what I've come to realize with a lot of these alternative parties, because we here, we don't refer to ourselves as small parties or third parties, we are alternative parties and alternatives from those that we have right now. What we have found is that there is a lot of camaraderie among ourselves because we are willing to have discussions. It's not just about my party is the best party and so forth. Now, of course, the Progressive Party, in our minds, we really see ourselves as a proper alternative to the kinds of governance that we witness in Trinidad and Tobago. We want to offer to the population new ideas, innovative thinking, things that are out of the box, but at the same time, things that are on everyone's lips, all right? Too many times we sit and we look at press conferences, we see committees being set up by the government, we hear of decisions being made by the government, and we ask ourselves, where is the input of young people? Where is the input of this group in society? Where is the input of that group in society? And there are many groups in society that feel as though they are second-class citizens, and that should not be the case. And that's why we've always offered the Progressive Party as a party that is open to any and everyone who wants to see better in Trinidad and Tobago. And we will continue to maintain that, because you don't have to be of a particular race, a particular gender, a particular sexual orientation, a particular religion, geographical space in Trinidad and Tobago, socio-economic background to join the Progressive Party. This is a party that is really speaking to citizens of this country to get involved in that national development process. Now, as I had mentioned very early on, this was the first time that these guys would have joined a political organization and worked in the way that they have worked. So I want to get an understanding from you guys in terms of that whole experience. Now, there are things that the public will not see, the behind the scenes and the work that we're putting in, because they may see us jump on a live, for instance, and they don't know how much trouble we had to go through to set this all up. And it really speaks to how dedicated we are. But how about you all share some of your experiences thus far in terms of this process and what it has been like for you?
I would say the long hours. I mean, yesterday, night before, Nikolai and I were there trying to get electricity in the building, the camp, the headquarters. And I mean, thankfully, we had the guys who we were getting electricity from. They came and they helped us, get the backlights working. We had the workers they came and got us to board up the open windows and whatnot. So it's a lot of late hours. So
early mornings and late nights.
Yeah.
I just want to build on that hour-driven thing, because funny enough, I started off here as a photographer. So in my head, what I was supposed to contribute to this was photography. And well, yeah, photography, because primarily I'm a photographer. But then the need required for video, the need required physical appearances, it required script writers, it required stage managers, it required social media content creators, it requires so many things, simply because, as Nikoli has always said, we run in this election on crumbs. Literally, we don't have the funding that we would like. And we have a lot of big ideas and no money to back it. So do we give up on those ideas, or do we find ways around it to try to make it work? And one thing I can safely say about this, positive, negative, good, bad, or indifferent, I have definitely learned a lot of skills being a part of this party, because there were a lot of things that I had to push myself to figure out, because the party is dependent on it. The people who are looking on us, thinking that this is an organization that you want to be represented by, we have an obligation to present our best foot, regardless of what is thrown at us. And best believe a lot is thrown at us. We get a lot of criticism, we get a lot of fight down, we get a lot of unnecessary comments, and there are times when we ourselves are demotivated as well, and we rely on each other to build on that and come out of the rut and that kind of thing. And but it's a struggle. Honestly, it's a struggle. And then there's the funny part about it is there's a lot that we don't know. Even till this day, there's still a lot that we don't know. So there are things that we figure out on the moment when we need it done. And it's like, are we in a position to do it? You can't really say no. So it's like, we are learning. And for that, I'm really appreciative, because as I say, it doesn't really matter how it turns out. We came out of this with the knowledge that no one else gave us. Really and truly. No, tell me, when has someone explained to you how this elections process actually works? What is the requirements for it? What do you need to do? And when you think about future planning, in an organization, they usually tell you how to become a supervisor. They usually tell you what you should study, or what you need to do, what the job description is like, and a lot of back information you get. So you get the opportunity now to decide if you want to move up or if you want to stay the same. But then in this, no one advertises politics to youth. And the reality is, if we look at natural selection, our elders will die out eventually. They will not be here anymore. So then what is the continuity plan? What is the contingency plan for the future of politics? Is it only reserved for those 40 plus? Do you have to be of a certain, like a certain economic stand, belong to a certain socioeconomic background, or is it really for any and everybody who really wants to put their foot in the race? How do you, and then on top of it now, is how do you garner the support to manage the whole process of running an election, and then furthermore running an MP's office, etc., etc. So for me, it's learning. It's really understanding how this entire thing works.
And what I think is funny is that people think that we're heavily funded. And if they look at our bank accounts, they would recognize that we have no money. And we're not even joking. I remember for nomination day, you told me that some people were messaging you and calling you and saying that they heard that we were giving out money in jerseys and stuff. First of all, the amount of jerseys that the party has in total, we can account for that. And secondly, we can't afford to give away money.
Nope.
We are walking around with our hands outstretched, hoping that we can get support. And the thing is that we have genuine interest in seeing this country forward. What I think will be amazing, absolutely amazing, is if we come out of this election successful, covering San Fernando West, of course, and doing all of that with a zero-sum budget. I think that will be the greatest thing that ever happened, because I can put my head on a block that when you look at red, when you look at yellow, they are being heavily funded. All right. And when you look at us, because you go around San Fernando and you see for Faris and for Sean, there are multiple constituency offices, so the sub offices and all of that. We are struggling to open one office, but bet your bottom dollar we're opening that. I think that is something that many people can appreciate, that we are literally turning nothing into something. And that's where I always speak about my civil society background, because I think had it not been for my involvement in civil society, I would not have been able to get to the place that I am at right now, and for all of us to come together and really and truly get this far. You know how many persons have said that this would not succeed. I think we are already successful.
Yeah, we are.
We are successful in this very moment, because we have done what many others have wished and hoped that they could have done. And without even calling names, but we saw that there was another party that many people had high hopes for. We even had high hopes for that party too. And they are not even contesting the election. But here we are, 1 year and almost 2 months since we've launched, and we at least have one candidate in this election, and that stands for something. And this whole talk about, many persons feel as though when you come into an election, it's just because you want to hit against the incumbent government or individual or whatnot. If we felt as though the government and the party in office right now was appealing to us as young people, as citizens, as young professionals, as hard workers, then we would have jumped on board. We would have been red and ready long time. We would have said, yes, this was the right choice. But it is not the right choice. It is not the right choice because of the amount of scandals and corruption and mismanagement and sheer arrogance that we've seen from the government that has us at this point right now where we are upset. But instead of being those who just simply complain, we are involving ourselves in the process and saying that this is something that we want to work toward a better Trinidad and Tobago. So we will get people coming and saying all kinds of things, but we know where we stand. And that's why even I am comforted with the fact that we've gotten this far, and we will continue. And trust me, on August 10th, and even beyond that, August 11th, we will be extremely proud of the work that we have put in. And I think that anyone who just simply trivializes our work and our effort, I mean, it's very disheartening to think that people will watch young people in a society where they have expectations that young people are supposed to be doing this, that, and the other. And when young people actually do it, we're quick to get criticism. Yeah. And I think those are the ones who pose the greatest threat to our democracy, because I think give them the chance, they would want a one-party state. They would want us to live in a dictatorship where you have the supreme leader, and who, if you say anything against that person, you should be banished. But that's not Trinidad and Tobago. That's not my country. That's not our country. And we have freedom of speech, as much as they try to stifle it from time to time. And I think that this process is supposed to be just very inspiring for young people, for anyone, as a matter of fact, in Trinidad and Tobago, to see that we've been able to do what we've been able to do, and we're still going, operating on crumbs.
Yep.
But let me open up to you guys. In terms of your whole process, this whole experience, what were, I guess, some of the highs, some of the lows, and as we move into this election, and those days are fast approaching, what are just some of those moments that you think it's important for people to know?
Well, I don't mind talking about one thing. It's not exactly directly speaking to the topic you raised, but it's the narrative you keep hearing now that you're too young.
Yeah.
And that is upsetting to me, because in Trinidad, we boast of a good educational system, push our children to do well. We send them far, far and wide across the world, and hopefully, hoping that they bring back this knowledge and this experience gained in the country. And then we tell them, well, no, you're too young. You cannot do this, you cannot do that. And I think we go about it in the incorrect way. When children and young people come into any organization, they have exuberance, they're keen, they want to succeed. And usually they fall into a system that's jaded. The system will, if they fall into line, it will beat them down. So I'm sure there are tons of lawyers, this, that, who got into the practice and many different professions. And then the older head say, "Now you can't do it this way. This is not how you do it. You have to. This is how we do it." And it just knocks the wind out of them. So it's kind of ridiculous that we have this population of well-educated, well-meaning persons with a large skill set, and we push them at the side because they don't know. And it's absolutely the opposite. They're the ones with the fresh knowledge and fresh ideas that they've garnered, and they're trying to put things in place, because the whole system obviously is not working. It's clear, right? And personally for me, it's a case of not that the people in power can't do better, they choose not to do better. And I think COVID for me highlighted that clearly. This present government got COVID so right in a lot of respects. Mistakes were made, but it's an ongoing thing. But they got a lot of the COVID right. But all the other things they had prior to that, procurement legislation, campaign finance reform, and I could go on and on. Where is that now? So is it a case of incompetence, or you're making that decision to do the wrong thing? And I think making the decision to do the wrong thing is much worse than incompetence, right? Sure. So that for me is that narrative of youth, and it's pissing me off, to be honest. And I'm tired of hearing people commenting and saying things like that. Like, I know young people who have skill sets that I will never have. And when you see them in their element, you'll be surprised. So that goes for everything, including politics, including, as you come from civil society. When you let young people with ideas blossom, guidance with experience, of course, what they can do, they will put older heads, because usually older people are entrenched and they're less flexible than youth. And so that's the part of this whole experience for me has been sobering, because I'm a little older than you guys, and I try to offer my advice, and that's another thing. You and Morgan and the other younger people are much more open to advice than a lot of people might expect. You know what I mean? So, it just shows that the adults in Trinidad need some time just to, let the younger people blossom and do what we are technically training them for, to start to run the country. And why not earlier? Get them involved earlier. The earlier, the better.
I think some of these older folks, they have the mindset, well, I started this at this particular age, so you need to start it at that age also. I don't want you starting it like earlier, because why must you have all this around you, or what are you looking for? Like all this opportunity at such a young age, and when I was at that age, I was doing this, and I was doing this and doing that. I think a lot of our older folks have that mindset right now, and that is something that needs to change in Trinidad and Tobago.
And the thing is that it's not going to change by people probably just blogging about it or sitting down and doing nothing. Because if we want to look at some of the greats, because I mean it's subject to each person's interpretation and so forth. But you look at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., you look at Malcolm X, you look at even Gandhi, you look at all of these persons, Nelson Mandela, all of these individuals who we see as true representation of leadership and they breaking the mold and really stepping forward. They did not make that kind of a change by just saying, well, hey, somebody will do it one day and let me keep my head down and let me mind my business. No, you have to break away from that. And I mean, we are all making sacrifices. Every single person who has been involved in the Progressive Party has sacrificed something in order for us to get to this point. And we will continue to make sacrifices because we believe in what we're doing. It's not simply about the Progressive Party, but what the Progressive Party represents. Exactly. It's a movement. It's a means to progress, a means to change. I always, of course, substitute the word change with progress because of progress and what that means. Change, as I always say, it can go left, it can go right, you can go up, it can go down, forward, backward. But with progress is forward ever moving, all right? Progress speaks to that. And I think that what will be our greatest accomplishment is getting people to understand that they too can unlock their potential.
Yep.
This has to be, if we have to be seen as the sacrificial lambs, as the ones who are the trailblazers or whatever it is, those are not necessarily the titles that we're looking for. But if history will be so kind as to record us as the individuals who said enough is enough with this two-party system, enough is enough with poor governance in our country, enough is enough when it comes to young people being sidelined and told that you're not good enough, you're not educated enough, you're not experienced enough, then this is a title and a road that we are willing to accept.
Yeah.
And I think that we will come out of this much more educated about the process, the experience.
For sure.
Because many people will talk about, yes, I'm going to run for elections one day, I'm going to be prime minister, I'm going to be doing this, but how many of them actually do that? And my goal is not, my end goal is not to become prime minister of Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, it's one of the things that I would love to accomplish on the way, but the end goal really is a better Trinidad and Tobago. If it requires me becoming prime minister, or any one of you on this table, or anyone in the party becoming prime minister, then great, all right? But our end goal is to place our talents, our ability, our skill set, our time and energy towards something that will guarantee us a better Trinidad and Tobago.
It's true.
And the sad thing is that many people, because they are so heavily entrenched in this, I is at this because I'm a grandmother, my mother, and so by so, that they can't see beyond their noses. Stop.
Sorry, no, continue. Sorry.
All I was going to say is that when people say I'm a diehard PNM or a diehard UNC, I watch them as like, what is that? How does that add value? When you go to the grocery and the cashier has rung up your bill, do you just say, well, I am a diehard PNM?
I feel,
where does that carry you?
and I feel people with that kind of mindset, it does cloud their judgment for critical things concerning the country. You understand? Like if they say that diehard PNM or diehard UNC, so
Yeah, well, the ability to look at how Trinidad is presently and our politics for the last 30, 40 years, can you genuinely say Trinidad is in the place that it's supposed to be at this point in time with all the human resources, the raw materials, etc.? The fact is, no. We're supposed to be a world leader in so many places. We aren't. And then why? The fact is, why aren't we? Who have been the leaders for time? So it's all well and good to say I'm a diehard PNM and I'm a diehard UNC. But if you cannot critically think, look at the facts for themselves, and beyond that, challenge if you're a diehard PNM or UNC, have the ability to challenge your leaders to actually foster some change, then you're wasting everybody's time, including the rest of the country, right? If you think that the PNM is actually better or the UNC is actually better, then it's up to you to make them do the right thing. And your inability to do that shows you that they don't actually represent you, right?
And furthermore, your voice don't matter, because the one thing that always gets me is that we say we are diehard this or we are diehard that, right? But to me, I am a diehard family man. So if something happens to my wife, or my wife is unable to do something, my child is unable to do something, or is being hindered from that, my first response is to defend that, is to lobby for the betterment of that. So I will try to educate them, or I try to assist, I render my assistance in some form or fashion. Or, you do your role. So if my role is protector and provider, then I find a way to get another income source. I find a way to work longer hours. I find ways to fill the gaps. Now, I mean, this might sound fairy tale-ish, but the reality is that's all that we want. We want people to help us understand the system. We want people to help us get to the next stage. I don't want a handout. I don't want you passing on a music truck and give me $1,000, or $10,000, or $50,000 if you're so generous. It's not going to do anything for me when you look at it in the long run, because I can think of a million ways to spend $50,000 right now, and they're not going to do nothing for me, if we're being real. But it's more to than that. I don't want that. I want representation. I want you to understand that, okay, I need accessible roads. Cool. Let's see how we can get that done. And not at an election time. Get it done when it's needed to be done. You know, like all the ideas, and I mean, you make what also gets me is that they tend to make ideas in isolation. So they often have good ideas, don't get me wrong. I'm not here to bash anybody. The UNC presented good ideas. I mean, down to COP, even some of the alternative parties as well, too, when you look at their manifestos or their policy ideas or their vision, their mission, their whatever. They have good ideas, but who is allowing them to bring those to reality? Who is allowing the contributions? So, like a simple thing like this, where is this for the PNM or the UNC or the other parties, where they actually take the information from the citizenry and apply it and debate it in Parliament? Because for me, I haven't seen it. And I always make this argument, maybe the other constituencies are better off. Maybe they actually do it in other constituencies, and I would like to know where so I can move there, because I just want representation. I don't really care the color of the representation.
I have an interesting question here. Javan says, thoughts on electoral reform as a means of ending the two-party stranglehold on democracy.
So, before we jump on that, because there are two things that I want to unload really quickly. One, you had made a statement where you're challenging leadership, and I think that is very important. It's really holding leadership accountable, and if you can't hold your own leadership accountable, then why are you in it? You understand?
That's the point, because the political leaders in Trinidad make it seem like we are beholden to them, but they're actually our employee.
Exactly.
We employ them, and citizens in Trinidad need to realize that they are accountable to us. So if you're a boss of a company, right, it works exactly the same way.
Yeah.
You're accountable to stockholders or you're accountable to anyone. So when you ask the Prime Minister an uneasy question as a reporter, he shouldn't blow back.
Yeah.
He's supposed to answer because you're technically paying his salary.
And what's even more ironic is, wasn't Dr. Rowley the same one who took Prime Minister Patrick Manning to task?
Yes,
exactly. Yeah.
So,
He did a change.
Why it happened to you?
if he was able to take his political leader to task, and now that he is political leader and the Prime Minister, why does he find it so difficult to be held accountable even by his very own? So I will leave that there. In terms of your contribution, where you were making mention of it's election time and we're seeing all of these projects happening, this is my big concern. You have not gotten the kind of representation that you ought to receive for the past 5 years. We are on the eve of an election, and we're seeing all of these projects. The government has clearly hoarded money to get to this point where things are being given out en masse. Yeah, you go to, and if we're talking San Fernando West, you go to Mbakade, you go to Coffee Street, you go to all of these different places around San Fernando West, and you're seeing scaffolding up, Olera Heights, everywhere is being painted and clean and all of these things. But where was this all the time? This is my frustration, and I am hoping that the population is not gullible enough in this election to vote based on what they have seen in the past 3 weeks alone. You have to base your vote on something far more critical than, okay, finally, after waiting 35 years, they come to paint my house, my HTC apartment or whatever it is. If that is the barometer by which you judge a government's performance or your MP's performance, then I am worried about you. And that's the plainest way I could see that. You cannot be about, and what gets me as well, you see these diehards, if you just touch on that one quick time before we move on, these diehards who are suffering, there is no clearer way to say, these diehards who are suffering and run back to the polls every 5 years to vote in the same individuals. I have a serious problem with that. The question that was being asked again in terms of campaign finance reform, this is so critical for us to have. But you see, the problem is
No, not campaign finance reform, electoral reform.
maybe two-party system.
Yeah, that's right. That's electoral. Sorry.
PNM, no UNC will ever take on that role to dismantle a system that works in their favor. It will require alternative parties coming into government to finally bring the legislation or to lobby within government to bring that legislation. You saw clearly where the Prime Minister in May and the government introduced the legislation, the Representation of the People Amendment Bill 2020. But at the same time, the Prime Minister had acknowledged that he was going to call election in August.
Yeah.
Even if it was not August 10th, he must have had an inkling that he was going to call it in August. And yet, when you laid that legislation in Parliament, you sent it before a joint select committee, and a joint select committee must comb through the legislation, invite members of the public to give contributions. The Progressive Party was invited to give contributions, and we wrote back to the joint select committee and we gave comments and so forth. And you said that the JSC was supposed to report back to the Parliament by August 31st. I'm not sure if the Prime Minister understands dates or numbers or how these things go, but you must understand at least that when the Parliament is prorogued, you would have a situation where, you would have a situation where bills that are there will lapse. So right now, the Representation of the People Amendment Bill 2020 has elapsed. And I assure you that if this government comes back into office, we will have to wait another 5 years before that same legislation that was introduced into the Parliament will be taken up again. And what is even more concerning is that legislation only required a simple majority. It means that if the government wanted, in the morning, of course, before the dissolution of Parliament, if they wanted to pass this bill in one sitting, they would have been able to do that. So people have to wake up, put your political allegiances aside, and look at the bare facts. They are glaring. They are in your face. What more can we say? And this is why I think that young people are frustrated as well, because we look at our elders and we think to ourselves, how could you make such a decision? How could you do this? How could you do that? Because we are open to ideas and we are exposed to things taking place all over the world. And at the same time, we're seeing our little Trinidad and Tobago on fire. And we feel helpless at times. We feel as though we can't out the fire because we are being told by the people around, you're not a firefighter, this is not your business. That is the reality of it. So it's really disheartening. Well, I see that we're looking at some questions here.
Claire Sandy asks, what about taxes? What your plans for citizens to pay taxes? This is being used to better roads and infrastructure.
Okay, so tax collection is very important. We do support the Revenue Authority of Trinidad and Tobago as really being that mainstay to handle revenue collection. So you think at customs and excise, you think about non-national insurance, BIR, Board of Inland Revenue, merging those two entities and really cleaning up. That is legislation that if I, representing the Progressive Party in Parliament, would have supported.
Yeah.
Because it makes sense. If you have nothing to hide, then this legislation will not threaten your living.
True.
But we are seeing where certain individuals in society are very jittery about this legislation being passed to create this new body. And you have to ask yourself the very tough question, why?
It's because we are a contract-driven economy to a large extent, right?
But to take it a step further, my issue with payments to anything has never been the payment itself, the volume of the payment, or the period that you have to make the payment for. It's more what you're doing with it. And I mean, if we look at this from a simple perspective, we can get an accountability like a report from the local constituency office on the data for last elections or elections past. So it begs me to try to understand where is the data of our, like all the taxes that we contribute to. So, okay, you want to include property tax, but you include no discussion about where the property tax will go. What body is it going towards? What is the purpose of the property tax? How does it enhance the standard of living of every community and not just certain communities? And like, where does the money go? Because I think if people understand where the money is going, they will be less resistant to paying the money. Because at the end of the day, we are all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago will not be here if we don't contribute it in finance and human resource and every aspect of our daily lives. That's the reality. So it really bothers me that they are very selective with the type of information that they give, as though we can't understand what this would represent, or we can't understand the greater good of it, or we would really see through the nonsense that they're actually trying to do with it, or that it is poorly planned, or that it was not thought out properly, or that it is a failed bill, or that they had no intention of actually passing it. They wanted to just fall by the wayside. And these are the kinds of things that we need to start asking the right questions, and we need to start pushing to get the results from them.
Well, what I just want to say on that is that things such as property tax and other, let's say, bodies being set up, state entities, positions in the public service, all of these things, you as a citizen should not be fearful of these things. What you should be fearful of are the people who will be managing these systems, these authorities, these bodies, because property tax, it is something that will help the country as a whole raise funds to be able to complete projects. But of course, if you have everything going into the consolidated fund, who manages that? the Minister of Finance, who belongs to the particular government, who belongs to whatever political party. And if you have not scrutinized these layers, then you're doing yourself an injustice. Because you cannot take it blindly as, okay, well, we're going to have a new revenue collection agency or whatnot. Think about who is rolling out the legislation. Is this legislation really and truly sound? Are there any ill intentions around that? And once the answer to these things are really positive, then you can say, you know what, yes, let's trust it. But if there are so many things hanging over people's heads, even blatantly we're seeing where mismanagement and so forth, then I can understand the population's grievance where I don't trust them. So if I don't trust them, I don't trust this.
I agree.
So unless and until we put people inside there who we can trust, everything we're going to be huge critics of, and sometimes unfairly so. Some, and we have to admit that. We have to be big enough to admit that sometimes we are unfairly criticizing things. But it all comes with this system that we've inherited. But in 2020 and beyond, we have to just ask ourselves, can we do this for much longer? I do think that the next 5 years are going to be some of the toughest 5 years that this country has ever experienced. And we need the right people there to manage it. And when we say the right people, for instance, the parliament, this is where we've come forth with this message of break the parliament, diversify the parliament. You have to have a number of voices in parliament to bring different perspectives and views. But if you have everyone from this same team here who is under the whip, and everyone else on this team here who is also under the whip, then there is always going to be that adversarialness inside the parliament. But you have to have some unattached voices, some untainted voices who can bring a different level of discussion into the parliament. And that's why when people ask, well, what you all think you can do with one seat in parliament? Hey, let me tell you, we can do a lot with one seat in parliament because we can challenge things. You see, all the things that people are saying on the ground, no one is saying that inside the parliament.
Can ask the right questions.
You need people who can carry the voice of the people inside parliament. Because in as much as Kamala Prasad-Bissessa always says the voice of the people is the voice of God, we don't see that being practiced on that side. Yeah? So we have to be real and frank with ourselves. If we want better governance, it starts with the individuals you put in there. Don't just vote, don't wake up one morning and say, I'm going to put my X by the Balize, and that is it. But you don't know the name that comes after the Balize. Or you're going to put your X by the rising sun, and you never saw the candidate who is next to that rising sun. You have to vote based on, I like this candidate. If this candidate is in parliament, I think this candidate will defend my stances, my positions, my opinions, and defend me as a constituent. And if you do not have that confidence in the individual, don't waste your time voting for them. And this whole idea of voting for a lesser evil, I wish, it is my fervent wish that one day in Trinidad and Tobago, we will be able to amend our legislation to allow for none of the above on the ballot paper. So this way, people will not have to go in there to spoil a ballot or decide I ain't voting at all. Go in there, let your vote matter, because a vote saying I do not want any of the above, it can add something, it can go towards something. Because what we should also have provision in our law is that when you have the NOTA, it says if a certain percentage is attained, then you have to go back out in there for another election. Yeah. So because what you tend to have sometimes are minority representatives. Because when you look at how many votes they've achieved in total, it's not even 50%.
No.
And these are things that are flawed about our system. So we need better. We must demand better. And there are people out there who honestly have the roadmaps, who have the ideas,
The amount
who have
of
the plans.
the amount of joint select committees reports that are shelved in Trinidad. Remember the COP with the PP party, part of their agenda, the COP was legislation, reform legislation, and they had a committee about it. The committee presented it to the country. We spoke about it, and then just before elections, well, that that partnership started to fall apart, and then that was just shell. And it had some very good points and positions. Obviously, things to continue discussing, but the ideas were there to raise to the population and to give feedback, and we can do better. We're still fighting up with laws and positions and ideas that are, colonial, basically, and even our colonial masters have left that behind, but we are still fighting up with those laws and legislations, which makes no sense. We had a question earlier, a general question about your idea about judicial reform and how to deal with the issues facing the judiciary. There are a few more I want to get to, but that one, and then there's another one with I'll come. We can answer that one first.
Well, judicial reform, we need a more independent judiciary. And when we speak about independent, it really speaks to issues of funding, free from political influence, free from influence of the executive, and that's why you have a judicial services committee that speaks to the appointment of judges and so forth. I'm trying to, I feel I'm off with the name by one word, but that committee is set up to be responsible for the appointment of judges and so forth. So they would screen individuals and all of that. Because if you had the executive appointing judges at their whims and fancy, then you would have people being placed in the judiciary as judges who will side with whoever is in the government. And that even leads me to another point where I do think that the Attorney General should not be a political figure. Insofar as the Attorney General right now belongs to the government and in effect a party, all right? And your job as Attorney General is not to defend your party. It is to defend the country. So when there is a matter that goes against the people of Trinidad and Tobago and it is pushed on us by the government, the Attorney General should be holding the government accountable and recouping whatever expenses and so forth. So that when it is that the government has mismanaged, the Attorney General should be suing, in effect, the government. But that is not happening right now in our system. So we need an office that is free from political influence, that has the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago at heart, and operate like that. But then again, if we look at an office that is supposed to be set up in that way, the office of the president, many people will see that they cannot trust that the president is non-partisan, because a certain political party would have appointed through the government, appointed this president. And I'm not just talking about our current president, but presidents of the past. Because we're always seeing that this is a PNM president or a UNC president or whatever it is. And we need to move away from that, because if you don't have that trust or that faith in the president, who is the head of state of Trinidad and Tobago, then what really can you trust? You know what I mean? So we have to revise and review a lot of these institutions to make sure that we as a population are comfortable with them and what they are putting forward. There was another question, I think.
We have a question here from Rebecca. Does this party have a plan for improving efficiency within government agencies and inter-ministry communication?
Yeah, so let me put it out there one time, and I don't know if you could probably change the banner there so you can switch the banner to our sites, but we have actually proposed in our 16 policy positions one that speaks to a revamping of the public service to ensure that we have more technology-driven approaches, but also to look at persons not losing their jobs in the process, because we have to retool and reskill a lot of individuals to meet with 2020 and beyond. Because you see these kinds of things about our government work, and I go in there and I just sign in and I spend 2 hours and I bust out, and everybody wants a corporation work. Everybody wants to work in the borough and all of these things. Like, we need to get out of that mindset. I would love to see that once the Progressive Party forms the government, because it's going to happen one day, believe you me, it's going to happen, that when we get to that point, that we have enough faith and trust from the public service to say, here's what, we are going to revamp this entire thing but you're not going to be thrown on the red line. You're not going to be kicked out. You're going to be given a second chance. Because as much as you might have been carrying the public service in a particular direction, we are saying, you know what, under different circumstances, let's see how we can use your talents and your skills, because you still have talents and skills. What I would have loved to see is that when ministries close down and all of these things, because government come, government go, they always add in new ministries, collapsing ministries and stuff, because they're free to do that, yeah? We need to fix those kinds of things.
Yeah.
I did not know it was so late. This is going so good. But I know I have another interview right now. So we're going to take this discussion over to Youth Votes TT. So I want you all to head over to that page on Facebook. They're going to do a live with Jason Williams of the People's National Movement, who is the candidate for Barra San Juan, and Felicia Holder of the Progressive Empowerment Party. And she is going up for Diego Martin's Central, I think it is. But tune in and let's give some support to Youth Votes TT. So I really appreciate this. We will go through the comments here and try to add some responses on our social media. But this was a good chat.
Yeah.
And we only scratched the surface. Yeah, we have a lot more to go. So thank you so much. Drop your comments, share this video, and please give us the support. One seat in Parliament can make a whole lot of a difference. Just one seat, yeah? So have a good night, everyone.
Take care.
All right, good night.